Well, good afternoon, everybody, and welcome to the Tuesday, April 27th edition of Bull Sessions. My name is Mark Robertson. I'm joined here by Ken Kavula. Say good afternoon, Ken. It's a beautiful day out there.
Well, you might have beauty down by you in the southern part of Michigan, Mark, but all I have is grayness up here.
Really?
Although it is spring and we're getting leaves coming out now. Yeah, it's a very gray, dull day. It's warm. I'll give it that. It's warm for us at least, 55, 60.
For those of you in the
So
audience, I live about an hour south of Ken, and there's not a cloud in the sky here. That's amazing.
I will also tell our audience that a week ago, Mark had 2 or 3 inches of snow on his grass, and we didn't have anything up here in the north. So
The weather can be a wild card. All right, well, welcome to this session. Again, this is a session that we put on just kind of an ad hoc impromptu, although we do some prepping, obviously. The idea is to spend some time with some topics and themes. One of our themes that we like to tackle on the day of tonight's roundtable, and we'll do this monthly, is to take a look back. That's what the retrospective is all about up at the upper right. Take a look back at what we selected 4 years ago and how those have fared since then. So we'll take a look at that. Kim is probably not going to be able to join us. She will be at the roundtable tonight, but Kim inspired the Stocks Under Rocks. That's a reference to the students' analyst program, basically investment analyst program at Tulane University. That's what the Birken Road Reports is about. Stocks Under Rocks is a book by the professor down there. We do have another new sheriff in town, so we'll be taking a look at the Groundhog again, even though I said we weren't going to do this every week. But when we have new sheriffs on duty, we have to take care of that. And then we're also going to take a look at the selling better concept that Ken and I have been kicking around for some time now, and just give an update on that. So Ken, if you're ready, we'll just get rolling.
let's get hammering on it, Mark.
We're hammering. All right, here's your disclaimer. No investment recommendation is intended. Most everybody here in the audience has been here before, but if you are new, big healthy welcome to you and a big hug. Everything that you see here is about education, and with emphasis on that word demonstration. Everything is shown for illustrative purposes only and is not intended to be a recommendation for purchase. Do your own homework, study the stuff that we talk about. You will be hearing our opinions, and we do try to remember when we have a stake in anything that we talk about in terms of actually holding in portfolios. Tonight's roundtable should be a good one again. We're flying pretty high, and we are going to double down on some of the analysis on the selling better concept. But if you'd like to be added to the reminder list for that monthly webcast, it's always almost always the last Tuesday of every month at 8:30 Eastern Time. Send an email to nkavula1@comcast.net. If you have follow-up questions or would like copies of slides, or you have things that you'd like us to talk about, send an email to me at markr@manifestinvesting.com. All right. Here's our general layout for today in the bullpen. We'll talk just briefly about another new sheriff in town. I do want to share with you, Ken, that I am in the cryptocurrency world now. I'm learning a few things.
All right. Which one did you settle for, Mark?
Well, you're going to see, but Ethereum.
Okay. Ethereum, that's what you had talked about, yeah.
So we're going to play with that a little bit. I have no idea what I'm doing, but I'm trying to learn. And that's sort of what the Modern Investment Club movement was all about. So let's learn. Quick article from Ben Carlson about fund portfolio. Ken, I think you'll find it interesting that it basically underscores our core versus non-core concept that we talk about. And then we'll update on selling better. Other than that, we'll cover some of these other topics in future sessions. Any comments or questions at this point, Ken?
Well, I like it, Mark. Every single time we can reinforce things that we've been saying for 50 or 60 years, and every other voice that we can add to that lends more and more credence to some of these ideas. I really, really like this core versus non-core concept, and every now and then having a little bit of fun and shooting for the fences, trying to hit a home run with a little tiny bit of your capital.
Yep, absolutely. we've been enjoying our Delex in the roundtable portfolio, and our Delex was up to 850 this morning. Seems to be hanging in there pretty well. So let's go ahead and get underway. Here is our Groundhog update with the new sheriff in town being Nancy King. Pretty sure Nancy's from Maryland, and probably not too far from Ty Hughes. But both Ty and Nancy are up at the top of the charts. Sheriff O'Brien is still hanging around up there. But again, I see no need to show this as long as I'm not on the list. And Ken, I haven't yet climbed back on the list, but I do enjoy seeing all of these Michigan entities on here, and a whole bunch of people that we can't wait to see in person someday soon.
Well, I want April 26, 2021 immortalized, Mark, as the day when all four of my clubs and myself ended up in the top 40. So I want that duly noted somewhere in the historical records.
So do I need to frame this and send one up to you, or
frame it and put it on your wall, okay?
Well, you're
downstairs in the basement
don't
there.
Forget you're in number 18 also, so you've got 6, I think.
Oh my goodness. Okay, I'll take it.
I guess that means you're dominating. So anyhow, the numbers continue to improve. By the way, we typically see about 60% of participants beating the market, and we're down around that, hovering around that 40 level. That just probably suggests, no surprise, probably, that there were a few people swinging for the fences this year compared to other years. And again, we have tremendous respect for Kathy Wood. We think she thinks like we think. She's been red hot for 5 years. But this year, not so much. And she would rank 144th out of 149 groundhogs. And we'll just keep watching that also. All right. Let's keep rolling. Here's Nancy's portfolio. I thought it was kind of fascinating, Ken. Just 5 stocks. She went in for the housing stuff, went in for the turnaround in cars, went in for the turnaround on boats. The VMware was, I know that's a Cy Lynch favorite from the roundtable. And the one that I'd never heard of before is energy recovery. Are you familiar with that one?
Not at all. In fact, Mark, I just added this to our study list for our wolves that are going to meet tomorrow night. We like to study half dozen unknown stocks and see if any of them meet the criteria that we set for purchase. So I've added this to the study list for the club, and we'll be taking not a deep dive, but we'll be taking a medium-sized dive into the company and seeing what makes it tick and where's the money coming from, and more importantly, where will the money be coming from in our estimation in the next 5 to 10 years. So this is really an unknown quantity to all of us, I think, in my investment club, and it'll be an interesting discussion because it really kind of moves right towards some of the issues that we've been talking about long term for the last year and a half.
Yeah, no, I do think it's kind of cool because I think many investors found that bandwagon a few years ago with respect to the strategic importance of water, just regular old water. And this may be an area that has been less opportunistic. People have not jumped on that bandwagon yet. These guys do brackish and desalinization. And I would agree with the premise that this could be a very important area in the future. Be a good study.
I'd also like to figure out how much of the 1 point who knows trillion dollars is going to go to companies like this to boost their productivity and maybe boost their exploration and their research and everything else to help move us ahead. I know that President Biden feels that a lot of this alternative stuff is definitely part of infrastructure, and I tend to agree with him on this particular point that this is the kind of infrastructure that I think an awful lot of people can get behind and deal with. The last thing we want to do up here in the Great Lakes is to build huge canals and send our fresh water all over the place. There has to be better ways than transmitting the water from one geographic location to another one long ways away. And I like to come up with that. We got a lot of water on the planet. Let's figure out how to use it a different way.
Well, one last comment. These guys are out of San Leandro, California, so they're out there in an area that treasures water resources, and
Yeah.
should be interesting to watch. Here's a quick look at the image of the company. Obviously, those top line trends are compelling. Running in mid double digits or mid teens for a growth rate, according to that trend that you see there, and they've been coming along pretty well. We're going to talk in greater detail in a few minutes with one of the Birkenroad stocks about companies that have negative earnings as they are emerging and coming public. You see it there in the net margins. You see it here with some sub-zero stuff. You see it here with the scale being switched from logarithmic to a linear scale. So this is a early stage company, but they have been generating some results, and when they have reasonable expectations, respectable expectations for the next few years.
The market, when did the company become public exactly? Was it 2015?
Well, they've got prices going back to 2012, Ken, so I suspect it was sometime in that 2012.
That's what I was going to make the point. Those aren't errant I-bars then. Those are actual trading I-bars.
You should, unless I made a mistake, those are correct. So it's been around. All right. Here's the Ben Carlson article that I mentioned. For those of you that aren't familiar with Ben, he's from Grand Rapids. He works for Ritholtz, and he puts out a lot of compelling stuff. And you can actually check him out at A Wealth of Common Sense. He has a blog that he puts out a daily article on some type of investing or finance topic. And he spent a lot of time recently making a case for it, because he has spent a lot of time recently picking on the meme stocks and investors that are probably at high risk, whether they know it or not, et cetera, much like we would counsel investors to be careful. But he did write this one just the other day about having said all that, and I think it mirrors exactly the type of stuff when we talk about core versus non-core. Ken talks about carving out a piece to experiment and play with. And we think that's healthy for investment clubs. We think it's healthy for individuals. And as you know, most of you in the audience already know, we have divided the roundtable up into those two components, where we have our core up straight and parallel stocks, but in addition to that, we have some more playful opportunities. So Ken, here we go. Another source basically suggesting that it's not a bad idea.
And this isn't the first time in the last 5 or 10 years that we've confirmed that there's an awful lot of fundamental investors out there, a lot of people that think the same way we do and that invest the same way we do, that counsel you to have a little bit of your portfolio available for non-traditional kinds of things, to move in directions that you wouldn't normally consider, and occasionally to look at stocks that you wouldn't normally take a second glance at, especially, and I think it's something you and I are very aware of, especially smaller stocks that are just starting to become profitable, and how you can strike out on those pretty easily, but you can also hit a really nice home run on them too if you're persistent and you demand certain things out of the kind of growth that you want to see.
Yeah, and I really like the way Ben tied this to some of the human psychology here also, talking about humans being emotional, and we know about battling that and all that kind of stuff. But Ken, I happen to be an expert on finding weight. I'm more of an expert on finding it than losing it. And this, one of the things that I have to confess to is, if I try a diet that says I can't cheat, it kind of like makes me cheat, if you know what I mean.
Well, you want to see if somebody's going to catch you, Mark. That's what you want.
Whatever. But I'm playing around with this new app called Noom, Noom, and they basically say it's crazy to tell people that they can't cheat. We have to find a way to learn to eat and maintain a healthy diet and allow for cheating, if you will. In fact, they won't even call it cheating. They just say it's just normal human behavior that you're going to have to accommodate that and learn how to live with it. And
Yeah, I'd love to enter into a one-on-one conversation or a group-on-one conversation with Mr. Carlson, because I'd like to hear his thoughts about what do you do if this kind of investing makes you queasy and makes you nervous and makes you start thinking about this your investments, for inordinate amounts of time. I'm pretty certain that after reading everything else he's written here, I'm pretty certain he would say, well, if it makes you uneasy, cut back on it.
yep,
It's as
yep.
simple as that. It's not something that's going to be made for everybody's psyche. And if 20% of your portfolio is way too much and you find yourself being unable to sleep, then cut it back to 10% or cut it back to 5%. And if this isn't fun, then it's possible to cut it back to nothing and put together a portfolio that I do know that there's a minority of our people out there that are very comfortable with a pretty staid, I like to call them boring portfolios that don't do anything except make money. If that kind of boring is what you need in order to sleep, then by all means, we're not suggesting that you must do something like this, but we're suggesting for those of you that are a little bit taken aback by not being able to put your money into some of the more risky kinds of investments. Sometimes people need permission to do things, and I think giving them permission to be wild and crazy occasionally is a good thing.
All right, well, we'll move on. I'll make a little note that maybe we do something with Grand Valley out there with Ben, and I've made a note as long as you promise not to ask me about dieting practices.
Okay.
All right, here's my discovery. Talk about things you don't know. I did buy a little bit of Ethereum just to get a feel for what this cryptocurrency stuff is all about. I do have family members who are deep into the arena. And Ethereum I selected because it's wedged in so well with some of the blockchain. Nick DiVirgilio is online here, and he sent me a bunch of references about it. It's definitely in the, call it the infrastructure of cryptocurrency, and the gamers and all that kind of stuff are definitely synced up with this along with the blockchain. So I figure, what the heck, I'll just throw some money at it and learn how to watch it. What I did discover, though, is it doesn't sleep. It goes 24/7. You know how we're all very accustomed to the market closing and we kind of catch our breath or whatever. I'm exaggerating, but there's this kind of false sense of security of the market being closed and you don't have to worry about your investments running around on you. You don't get that here. It goes 24 hours a day, 7 days a week. So that's my discovery, and I'm sticking to it.
Mark, we're getting some questions from some of our audience, and they are along in the same vein. And I think it's because of the way that our community has trained itself to always try to find sources to help them understand whatever the investment is and to help them evaluate whatever the investment is. And I think that we're asking them in some cases to take a couple of steps out onto a tight wire, a high wire, and to put something in based not on the kind of rigorous study that you're used to putting in before you purchase a stock or some other type of investment. Do you think that that's the way it has to be, or do you think that we can come up with alternatives to study some of these things?
I'm very early into this. I have to tell you that that I'm aware of, there is no fundamental approach to this. There's no way to calculate what an apparent value would be of these investments. And, it really is going to come down to some level of charting, that kind of stuff. So again, it's early. We are going to read that book. and come back to the topic, but it's a brand new area for me, for sure.
Mark, we're also getting some questions about how did you go about making the purchase? Where did you go through Coinbase? Did you use something else? How did you go about making the purchase in the first place?
I didn't go through Coinbase, although I'm tempted to do that just to get that experience also behind me. But I just simply used the Robinhood account that I already had. They actually deal in cryptocurrencies, and they seem to do a nice enough job on the stock side of things. So just went with Robinhood. So we'll be coming back and covering all those vistas at some point. But if you're there looking for logic and reason, don't.
I'm going to ask one more question that is coming up here, Mark. Who holds the currency now that you own it? Where is it?
Well, it's held in trust at Robinhood, and through their transfer agent and their clearinghouses. So they're the ones that are responsible for making sure that it's secure and all that kind of stuff. So, and that's another reason to perhaps understand Coinbase a little bit better too, as they're the largest by far clearinghouse for investing in these type of currencies. All right, so we'll come back to that, but that's my confession for today, Ken. I'm in there. I hope this works out better than that volatility investment you forced me to make a few years ago in the VIX.
In the VIX? You mean the one that I twisted your arm on?
Yeah. And last time I invested in a car on the highway, from a car on the highway on my cell phone. Oh, well. All right, here's our retrospective on the roundtable from 4 years ago. It was a night that we featured, who's the actress there? Is it Jennifer Lawrence as Joy in the Home Shopping Network movie, Joy? I think that was her.
I'm not recognizing her at all with that pose. So,
well, she's looking up. Something special when creative people get together. Well, that evening I did choose the Home Shopping Network. Ken chose Maximus, one of our multiple selections of Maximus over the years, and Hugh came in with Bristol Meyer. And the voting is there on the left. You can see that I pretty much got slammed to the turf and beaten like a redheaded stepchild or something like that. And you can see the results down at the bottom of the page. I'm not going to gloat or anything, but that brief period between when I selected it and when it actually got bought out and returned back to the fold at interactive whatever, they've all worked out fairly well. So
I will tell you, Mark, that I'm a longtime holder of both Maximus and Bristol Myers, and I don't feel that the relative return is sad enough for me to get rid of these two particular stocks. I'm thinking to myself, we went through a pretty rough patch there a year ago, and if the relative return is off 4% over that 5-year period, I know that can be a significant amount of money, but for each one of the holdings, I still have a lot of faith in both of these companies. I wouldn't want to give the idea that we think either of these companies are slouches at a 16.4% return for the market, and at 12% return for Maximus. That's still giving you some decent numbers going forward.
Yeah, those are good results. I mean, I can have some fun with this and say I only beat you by a touchdown and a field goal, and if you're okay with that. But no, those are all good results. Bristol Myers is actually down on a fairly recent news item. I think they had a little bit of trouble with one of their pipeline drugs. Maximus is doing just fine. I mean, those are all good numbers. So we can basically celebrate. Here's some of the stuff we talked about that evening, and it's kind of fun looking back at Universal Electronics. That was one of the other stocks that you and I chose at the same time, Ken. And it had a 34% annualized return over the 5 years leading up into that roundtable. So we've had some fun with that. We also both selected Panera Bread. at some point in 2013, 2014, and we sold it that night because of an acquisition or a buyout for a handsome premium to what had been going on. Bristol Myers, again, on the lower left, there's just a lot of good stuff going on there. And at companies like Eli Lilly, it'll be interesting to see who Hugh has on his mind for this evening. He presented Gilead last month, but I think he may be coming with a beaten down Lilly or a beaten down Bristol Myers, perhaps even this evening. And there's the numbers for Maximus, and they basically are pretty much spot on. These are right out of your slides from 4 years ago, Ken, expecting 12% growth rates and 12 or 13% returns, and by golly, those are pretty consistent with what we've seen. All right, so let's keep pressing on. Did want to just point out that I spent some time looking over this thing. You can actually look up the Birken Road reports. They just did a conference last weekend where the stocks in the lower half of the screen were all presented, and you can Google it and find your way to them. And I just presented the current updates on all of the companies, just again searching for that needle in a haystack type situation. And I was getting a little bit worn out by the time I got to the bottom, and I did hit Sharps Compliance, which we'll spend a little bit of time with. But these guys invest in, they're limited by geography to Louisiana, Texas, Mississippi, Alabama, Florida, and Georgia. So that carries with it some constraints that might be a little bit uneasy. Any names jump off the chart at you, Ken?
Yeah, Mark, is Team the old TSYS, bottom of the first group?
No, that's actually a HR company. TSYS is now, oh, help me. Billy Williams is here. TSYS is actually part of, is it Global Payments? I think they might be.
There's a couple of names that jump out only because we've been coming across them for 20 years now. One of them is Pool. It used to be called SPC or SCP, something like that, Pool Corporation. And the other one that we've been coming across for a long, long time is Hibbett, HIBB.
Yeah.
Both of those have been popular in our community, and at various times they've been extremely investable. So it's nice to see that kind of stock on the list, although I'll confess that there's very few of these that are actually familiar to me, and that I have taken any kind of a dive at all.
Yeah, one of the things I'd like to have a conversation with the professor. I think, you see an awful lot of emphasis on oil and gas field services, for one thing. That's natural, considering that area of the country. Quite a few regional banks. And, nothing against regional banks. You can find really good diamonds in the rough when you go out and find some of those. But I really would like to see an emphasis on faster growing companies. I created a dashboard. The average growth rate is somewhere around 5% top line growth. It'd be very interesting to encourage the professor and the students to, be pushing towards discovery of some of those smaller companies. And maybe that's something we can kind of work on a little bit. Sharps Compliance is an example of that. So let's go ahead and talk about them in a minute. Here are the companies that actually are added to the Manifest Investing database. This is from this week at Manifest, the last entry on the page. All of these came from the uncovered companies from this conference. And you can see that Sharps Compliance, there's actually a link to what I'm going to show you here, a hot link that you can click through on. And here's the company. These guys are in the business of medical waste disposal, used syringes and used equipment. And they're headquartered out of Houston. They are now in, I want to say, at least 40 of the 50 states. But they've been trucking away for a number of years. Notice the growth rate is in that teens area. It makes it one of the higher growth components of their portfolio. And you can see the steadily improving profitability as they reach scale with some of their programs and some of the things that they're doing, penetrating markets and that sort of thing. So, again, we're talking about a company that a few years ago did not have positive earnings, hence the linearness here, just so we can actually see it. It blows up a stock selection guide for this period that you see here. And the other thing that we want to point out is this is an example of what naturally happens. A company comes along, looks like they're doing a pretty good thing. Things are going along pretty good here. Profitability is increasing, earnings are coming up, and then they hit a speed bump. A speed bump on a small company with very little track record is ugly. And here's how ugly is. That trough that you see right there, that is a completely normal thing for the disappointment that follows this actual event that is happening right here with the earnings. All right, so they do seem to be coming out of it well. They are progressing very nicely. There is a bump with COVID here and more vaccines and more syringes to throw away, to dispose of. And, very nice projections for the next couple of years.
So Mark, would this company compete with Stericycle in one-on-one competition?
It would be a competitor with Stericycle. And I would say they're almost like a Netflix competitor, because they started with a mail program to companies like Stericycle. And now they're kind of a combination Netflix and Amazon within their world of medical waste disposal. So it's kind of a fascinating thing to watch. So it's got decent growth characteristics and decent expectations. Seems to be a well-managed company. So yeah, that's who they're up against. So think Netflix and Amazon comes to the world of taking care of disposed syringes and other stuff. Any other thoughts, Ken?
No, but Mark, we have a hand in the air, and I'm going to try to get that hand answered right now. It's Nick DiVirgilio. I hope, Nick, that I'm saying it correct. I hate it when people butcher my name, so correct me if I'm off. But you're going to have to unmute from your end, Nick. There we go. You're okay.
Yeah. Hi. I took my hand down, so thank you.
Okay. Well, it's still up, so I'm going to take it down for you right now.
Thank you.
Good to hear from you.
Okay, and we have Matt Spielman would like to make a comment, and Matt, you're self-muted as well, Matt.
There we go. Hey guys.
There we go. How are you doing?
I'm good, thank you. Not struggling with bad weather. It's a little cloudy. Just one comment here, and I'd started typing it in, but it might be worth discussing. So there's no business reason for it, but I just put two points together. You talk about a slump in 2017 and 2018. Of course, Houston was really suffering from the oil plunge at that time.
Yes.
So there's nothing, medical is generally a stable industry, but as regionally concentrated as it is, I could imagine, I don't know, I could imagine an echo of that in those earnings.
It certainly would have had to have some impact, I would think.
Yeah, I mean, people losing their jobs and getting off insurance, so just not going to the doctor.
Mm-hmm. They have done a really nice job of spreading out, and again, and we'll probably cover this in a workshop or something soon, but they have almost no penetration on the West Coast, California, Oregon, and Washington, whereas they've got most of the rest of the country covered now. But back in those time frames, they were just beginning to do their geographic expansion.
Mark, I just want to repeat to answer a couple of questions in the back here, that the 3 dots that you've circled, the 21, 22, and 23 dots, are obviously forecasts, and they're forecasts coming from an ACE community, and they're based on, give me the data source, Mark, for our folks, would you?
The data source is YCharts, ycharts.com, which is just an institutional source of data. A lot of the data comes from, but is not limited to, Morningstar. And I don't know if this one comes up on the Better Investing data feed or not. Maybe somebody can check that while we're online. But I offered up as an example of a company that is worthy of consideration and is certainly a nice component in this Birkenroads portfolio.
Well, and Mark, wouldn't this be exactly the kind of early stage investing that some of our clubs have been very adept at doing, and that that we have asked ourselves, shouldn't we be searching for a little bit more like this? I mean, if I look 2019 through 2023 at both graphs, I start to get a little bit of up straight and parallel feeling going on with the company making money or at least breaking even, and that might signal that I have an early stage company that I might want to hold on to. The scenarios that are good that come out of this kind of thing are maybe it'll be acquired by a big shot, and that'll make me some decent money, or maybe it will continue to be a nice steady growth company and be recognized as such and just take off and earn PEs that are a little bit more in line with a high quality growth company.
I would agree completely. Nicholson was quite persistent about wanting to have companies like this, and you almost got to the words I thought I was going to hear you say is, could we be looking at an early stage neogen? And I think a case can be made for that sort of thing, that you can have a neogen type experience with a company like this. So good, clean fun all around. All right, Ken, let's go ahead and wrap up today's discussions with a little update on our selling strategy stuff.
Mark, Nick has verified that SMED does not come up on the BI data feed, so it's not considered to have enough of a trading volume by Morningstar to move us into the data feed at this point.
Maybe I should offer data files a la carte. Well, I'm waiting for somebody to second that motion.
There's just deafening silence, Mark. That's all.
Okay. All right. So, Ken, what I thought we'd talk about here is, as you know, using the roundtable tracking portfolio, we have been experimenting with a number of selling disciplines. So if you'd like to kind of walk the audience through a reminder of what we look at when we go through what I would call the challenge process of managing a portfolio for the roundtable. So take us away.
Okay, first of all, Mark, I'm going to give an opposing viewpoint, because I have two people telling me it doesn't come up on the SSDG data feed, but I have Joe Farrell told me that he found it on SSG Plus, and Len Douglas tells me that it does come up, but it ain't up straight and parallel, quote unquote. All right.
Well, that's because it's as reported, but.
Yep. Okay. And I'm sorry, Mark, what question did you just ask me now?
Well, I was giving you the opportunity to get on your soapbox about our selling challenge process.
Well, I think that we've improved the performance of our roundtable portfolio considerably by just acknowledging the fact that there is a rule of 5 and trying to come up with ways. A person that isn't familiar with the rule of 5, when you first say it to them, says, well, that's an easy thing to solve. Just don't buy the one that doesn't perform. Well, maybe what we need is a method to kind of point out the ones that might not be performing and maybe move them out of the portfolio, not because we think they're rotten companies or because we think they're terrible, but they're just not performing based on what our SSG said they were supposed to do. So we move them out, give them a timeout, and maybe a year later or 18 months later, we look at them again and decide they've matured a little bit and they should go back in. That's basically what our rule of 5 timeout says. And this number, I know we've slapped a number of 20% drop in relative return in the first year or 18 months, but we've discovered that that rule is flexible, and there are some companies that were more than willing to boost that number up to 25 or 26%. There are some time periods where we're willing to kind of set this rule aside completely. I think last March, April, maybe May and June even, we were willing to set this rule completely aside because of the odd things that were happening in the macro environment that had nothing to do with some of our companies, but yet we're giving them just fits and starts as far as earnings were concerned, as far as sales were concerned. So we're not being really stringent on that number 20%, or even when we're going to use it. But I do think it helped us trim that portfolio up a little bit and improve our performance. I also like the idea of looking at the relative return. I think that of all of the numerical analysis tools, this is the one that I can at least understand why it might have some basis in something actually happening. I think it's a great measure of momentum. It tells me when people are maybe getting a little bit ahead of the stock. It tells me when people are maybe ignoring the stock a little bit too much. And when that moves above 80, I do think that as long as we keep the word consider in front of the word selling, I think it's something we can look at. I'm still not convinced that you can give me a graph and just give me the numbers and I can plot lines and tell you what that graph is going to do next. I just don't believe Carter Worth or any of his friends are going to be able to convince me of that ever. But this idea of RSI and helping us consider selling, I think it has a little bit of validity to it.
Yeah, and the other thing to keep in mind is we've got dozens of active positions in the round table. So selling a single position is not quite the same type of decision that you typically face with personal portfolios or investment clubs, and that is a part of it. And Roman candles are real. Let's face it. I mean, we've all had that company that went from 10 to 90, and we probably should have stepped aside or at least sold a partial position or something, because we watched it fall from 90 to 20. So Roman candles are real. So we basically go through these every month at the round table. And by the way, Ken, tonight's discussion will probably include, I happen to have a company that I've recently selected that has a relative return of minus 48.
All right.
And tonight I think I'm going to be, asking for a reprieve from the governor or something. So
now, are we going to bring up the other example of what happened the last time you had a relative return approaching that?
Yeah, because this is our poster child. And
I just set you, I teed you up really nice for this slide.
Yeah,
then,
you didn't even know this was coming. I'm going to show.
Yes, I did.
Okay, I'm going to show you two cases out of literally we have over 1,000 selections at the round table over the last almost 11 years now. This was Iconic's brand, and it's kind of our poster child because we actually talked about this relative return concept right here as you're looking at it. It was bought at the April 30th round table 6 years ago at a split adjusted stock price of $263.10. And that night when I made a wonderful presentation, you guys have all heard this. It was probably one of the best presentations ever. And the reason I know this is if you look to the right hand of the chart, we'll get to that in a minute. But we actually said if this thing drops off the table and drops down, 20% worse than the market, we're going to walk away. And we did that 4 months later, a little over 3 months later, where we sold it at $200.40 split adjusted, and reverse split adjusted, by the way, for those of you that appreciate reverse splits. So we basically walked away with $800 of our original $1,000, and you can see the rest of the story there. I proceeded to make a pretty good run at zero over the next several years. And in fact, if we had simply hung on to it, clung on to it for dear life, our $1,000 would now be worth $7.60 today. Now, what's interesting is, Ken, I think I probably was not necessarily wrong, but early, because around Halloween last year, it got down to 5/8. Remember, pricing stocks in eighths. So 5/8, and went from 5/8 up to almost $5 a share here. So there's the bump that would have made us rich.
Well, I didn't hear you present it at the September roundtable, but
I didn't double down on it, huh? So anyhow, the point we want to make is this was protective. This was taking one of our favorite children and calling time out and basically giving them a timeout. And that's what's behind the concept. Now, the flip side of that, and here's a hat tip to Ann Manning. Ann Manning actually selected Adobe back during the July 2011 roundtable, and it proceeded to do very, very well, to the point where it became, we're going to look at the slides that cover this in a few minutes, but it became the lowest return forecast, the lowest par in the portfolio at that red arrow. And we basically walked away and high-fived at the water cooler. And this is one of those examples where, what if we had just hung on? That $1,000 would now be worth $18,000. In fact, it would be the best single performing selection amongst all the 1,000 decisions made by the roundtable ever. So, Ken, I believe you came along a few months later and doubled down on it also, as we look back through the records.
There's been, it was a couple years later. It's been fairly recently that I've presented Adobe twice. So I'm buying it quite a bit higher than we sold it at. But I still think Adobe is a wonderful, wonderful stock. I'm going to talk a little tiny bit about Adobe tonight when I make my presentation. And I'm going to talk about why I didn't choose it yet again for the roundtable at this particular session. It made my top 3 or 4, but I turned my back on it. I think the next slide, Mark, also brings into focus a little bit of I don't want to say using your head, but I want to say that occasionally when we're doing various exercises in a tracking portfolio, that sometimes we move a little bit more quickly than we should. I'm not wondering if we had to do it all over again, whether we might have looked at Bank of America or Staples to sell rather than the relatively fast grower of Adobe systems. And I'm focusing in on that slower growth of Staples, which at that point in the portfolio represented 5%. If we really wanted to boost our growth, which was what the purpose of selling Adobe was, maybe we should have moved towards even a slower grower. Taking a slower grower out of the average would boost that 10.2% better than taking a faster grower out, and taking 5% out at a slow growth would boost it even faster than taking 2% out at a faster kind of growth. So I'm thinking that maybe as we do this and become a little bit more nuanced in our approach, that those are the kind of thoughts we might be talking about as well, at least for discussion points, if nothing else.
Yeah, and I would, since we're in the realm of Monday morning quarterbacking and second guessing ourselves here, I would take it even a step further, Ken, and point out that I don't know what my par was at that time, but this portfolio did not need any attention. That average par was 12.8%, and it's color coded in green. That means it's in the sweet spot. So if we're really sticking to our discipline, it didn't need it. And not only that, this is still above money market rates, this 3.3%. And I think that's kind of what Nicholson was always getting at when he says, hey, if you've got a growth stock, 8, 10, 12% or more, you basically want to be, less, you basically want to chill a little bit and be careful about selling them too quickly. And maybe this is a perfect lesson of that sort of thing.
And it the greatest thing that comes out of thinking about this, Mark, is the fact that all of these numbers across the bottom kind of depend on each other. They all kind of balance back and forth, and and one affects the next, and then one, another one affects the another one, and I don't think you can focus just on that 10-2 at the bottom of the growth column and say I want to improve it. I think at the same time you want to make sure that what you're doing makes sense. And I think what you said, asking yourself the question, do I really need to improve anything when the par is where it is right now, is a good part of the exercise.
Yeah, and we got into that situation with Cy recently with, over the last couple of years where, the overall portfolio par was too low. And we were trying to nuance our way out of doing anything then. And Cy says, you know what, if we're going to stick to our guns, the portfolio is saying it needs attention.
Yeah,
we should listen. So here's some other facts and figures for you. You can see that this was your selection, Ken, by the way, back in January 2012. I know you're doing it again now, but both of those are pretty handsome. And you can see the two returns. You can see the two moments. The projected annual returns, basically in this zone of being attractive at that time frame, and then the stock price behaving quite well, heading up on the Chronicle to the point where we got down into low single-digit returns on the Chronicle. So you see it there. You see it in the stock price chart. There's the two purchase points, and good time had by all. And so here's the bottom line, Ken. Again, we keep asking the question, what if we only sold the holdings from the tracking portfolio when we're forced to do so by an acquisition or a takeout, or in the case of a couple of my companies, when they disappear from the planet? It's not fun, by the way, gang, when there is actually one or two in the 1,000 that disappeared from the planet, and they were both mine.
How low can they go, right, Mark?
Well, no, wait. You had one of them.
I probably did. I know I did.
Chinese pork.
Chinese pork went belly up. Yes.
Mine was body
belly up. So.
Yeah, mine was Body Central. Anyhow, the question is, what if we just simply gritted our teeth and held, simply buy and forget? You see the results down here. The roundtable tracking portfolio checks in at 19.3. That's as of right now. And buy and forget, basically just ignoring all those guidelines we talked about. That's a 3 percentage point difference. And we think that's worth thinking about. Your thoughts, Ken?
What else can I say? It's worth thinking about, Mark.
Yeah, so we will continue to have that challenge process, and we think it actually keeps us out of trouble. For every Adobe that we have out there, there's a bunch of Body Centrals and Iconics brands. So good, clean fun. All right. Ken, you want to tell everybody what we're going to be doing in a couple weeks?
Well, I hope that most of you have gotten this idea now that we're running our third successful investing conference. We're going to be running it on May 12th, 13th, and 14th. That's the original days of the Better Investing National Convention, the BINC for this year. BINC has been moved into October. Cross your fingers that we'll all be able to gather there, those of you that can make it, and that we'll be able to sit next to each other and do some of the things that we normally have done at conventions. But we're going to run another virtual one in May. On Wednesday, May 12th, we're going to talk about small companies. We're going to talk about screening for them and how you can look for them. We hope to let you leave with a lot of new ideas for small companies. And we're doing our best to come up with some ideas that aren't even in some of the databases that you normally use at this time. On Thursday, we have a brand new class. We're going to talk about from theme to target. And we're going to try to help you identify things that once you settle on a basic theme, that you can focus that theme and then come up with actionable stock ideas that are based on that theme. We're also going to talk about a little bit of portfolio design and management, maybe get into a little bit more about core and non-core, and talk about some of the things that you need to do so that you can turn that buy and forget concept into a concept that's going to give you even more return than you've been getting. Cy is going to talk on Friday about stacking the deck in your favor, things that you can do on the stock selection guide, which just might give you an extra boost to help you come up with just the stock for the place in your portfolio. And then we have our distinguished stock panel, Kim Butcher from Florida, Pat Donnelly from Pittsburgh, Herb Lemkel from Florida and Traverse City, Cy Lynch from Atlanta, Hugh McManus from Pasadena, Mark Robertson from beautiful Rochester Hills, Michigan,
Sunny.
and Matt Spielman,
Another sunny day.
sunny Rochester Hills, and Matt Spielman, formerly of Ireland and now residing down in the Houston area. These 8 folks are going to give you their best stock idea on Friday, May 14th, and they're going to follow up with a lightning round of a second great idea. Here's the ideas of just about, I don't know, a year ago, would this be almost exactly?
Yep.
This was May 14th through 16th in 2020 when we presented these companies. And before you get too antsy about those 3 red relative returns, look at the total return for those 3 that are even not quite beating the market. I don't think you have a loser in the group. I mean, when Kim can say that Vectrus only made 20% plus for the year, I think most of us would settle for anything which you could point to that made 20% plus for any of the years. The next 2 up 30% plus and 40% plus. Now, we do have some phenomenal choices on this list as well. And this has been our history when we put together a panel like this, that we're able to give you 3 or 4 or 5 really great, actionable ideals. And when we presented these companies, this whole collection of companies, I think there was an honest feeling from every presenter that these stocks at that point were in the buy zone. So we're looking at some ideas that you might never have heard of before. We don't guarantee that any of these are in the buy zone today, but we're still looking at stocks that we think are good, straight, solid, high quality growth companies. And you might want to take a look at the kind of things that we're recommending. Maybe next roundtable, we'll show you the stocks that we picked would have been last October, maybe, Mark? I think
last November.
Last November, okay.
Like to talk about those because those aren't as good for me.
They're not doing as well. Okay.
Yeah, I had emergent biosystems in there, and that's been an absolute crash. But I do notice that, Ken, you make the classic tradition of report card behavior of going to those red numbers, when I prefer to point out that there are 5 doubles and 1 triple at the top of this list.
Absolutely.
And that's just that's good, clean fun. Past performance is no guarantee going forward, but we'll do the best we can. Here's a reminder that we do have we keep archives of all these recordings on YouTube under Manifest Investing. You can find the bull sessions, and I just wanted to point out that all the roundtables are there also, so you can check those out at your convenience. Subscribe if you would like to be notified on when new material lands there. Those are the slides from the 2 conferences, the 2 COVID cancellation conferences from May and November, if you want to warm up for that session 2 weeks out. And then we will be on tonight with our April roundtable. Anything else, Ken?
No, we have lots of questions, but we're going to ask you to save some of those until next time. We do like to keep the Tuesday of the roundtable to just 1 hour. So I'm going to say good afternoon, everybody, and I hope to have you listening to us this evening.
All right. Thanks, everybody.